G'day all, Adam Wuiske here from Wuiske Models. I'm joined today, this is something a bit different we're doing, just to see what happens. So I'm joined here today by Lyndon Summers from Lyndon's Trains, or apparently Lyndon's Basic Australian Trains. Did I get that right?
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time, yeah. Or
I'll
LBAT, you
I'll tell a
mentioned.
story. Yeah, I'll tell the story about the name change.
So before we get into it, I've got to start by saying I actually know 4/5 of bugger all about you and your business and how you got into the hobby, so I actually really want to know. Basically, I know you, or we know each other through our Friday night chat, which I apparently often confuse as a Wednesday night chat because it used to be. But yeah, our Friday night chat, which is running in like 8 or 9 hours from now. And yeah, and with some interesting incidents and jovial situations that happened there, that we shan't talk about.
No, we won't. We'll leave those out.
You'll have to join the chat if you want to see those things. So, mate, tell me, what exactly do you do? And actually, no, just tell me, what exactly do you do? Because this is for my benefit. I'm sure there's going to be people watching this that are just, Adam, you're a moron.
So, I produce kits.
Yep.
Majority is Victorian prototype, although I do have a separate brand as well called Cane Trains, which I produce models of cane trains, oddly enough, in HON30 and ON30. But the Lyndon's Train side of things is my kits, plus I, over the years, have also started retailing other people's brands as well. So I've taken on Gopher Models, Badger Bits, IDR, well, several others. VR Casts, I did some of their stuff for a while as well. So
you're kind of becoming an accidental hobby shop.
Yeah, an online hobby shop is sort of what it's getting to, yeah.
I can relate to that. I kind of became an accidental hobby shop at one point as well, just because when I was building the layout and everything else, the quantity of stuff that I was going through, I was getting it in, and then people would turn up and, can I buy that off you? And I was like, okay.
And then you started,
and then it turned out that all of my retail prices were lower than everyone else's, which was just due to my own ignorance. And so it sort of took off. And then I started adding it to the website, and I went from there, and so on. So I became a hobby shop. So these are what, polyurethane kits, or pewter, or white metal brass, or what?
So they're usually a mix. So they're normally either polyurethane or 3D printed, depending on. I've moved more into 3D printing over the last couple of years.
For sure.
Just to save myself time and effort and playing around with guck. But some stuff I still produce new as polyurethane. It's good material to work with, and as a modeler, it's easy to work with as well. Yeah. But most of my kits have obviously the main components either cast or 3D printed, but then I've usually got brass detail parts, bogies which I get from either SDS or associated distributors, whoever happens to have what I need at the time. And throw it all together in a bag and put it on a shelf. Hope someone comes along and says, "Hey, I want that."
Excellent. Okay, so all right. So you do rolling stock, you do structures, you do detail components and things like that.
Yeah, a couple of loco kits as well. So I've done 2 HON30 loco kits. So I did Bly that ran through Nambour, which now is I've done a Toka Mill in Fiji. And I've done an EM Baldwin in HON30 as well, and I've done a Comeng in ON30, and at the moment working on with Ron Aubrey on a Clyde 060 in ON30. Okay,
well, that's with a jack shaft drive, no doubt.
Yes, and it's so it's progressing. So it's just a bit of work to do on the body and chassis. Sorry, not the chassis, the body, and adding a bit more detail to it. But yeah, we've got the mechanisms done. I've got all the cranks. I'm getting the etches sorted for the side rods at the moment. So that's progressing.
Okay, all right. And how did you get into this?
Well,
and just to preface that I only asked the question because I think that the way I got into it was rather comical. But the longer I've been in the industry, basically every manufacturer effectively got into it by accident.
Yeah, very much by accident. I mean, it was a hobby.
Yeah.
You know, my father and my grandfather before and such. But yeah, it was an accident. I thought, I've seen people doing it, and I was wondering how hard is it. So I started doing a bit of research because I wanted to produce a couple of things for myself, and I thought, I wonder if I could do a few of them rather than having to scratch build everything. And I spent a bit of time online digging around, researching, and I found Barnes's website.
Yep.
And back in those days, their website had all these great PDF tutorials you could download on how to do molding and plug molds and casting and all this sort of stuff. And so I had a master, which actually I didn't need a duplicate of. It was a Victorian Railways V class, of which there was only one anyway. Yeah. But anyway, I just thought I've got this one here. I'll in the right sort of state to be able to make a mold out of it. I'll start with that and see how I go. And then I did I think it was a QN ballast wagon as well.
Okay. Yep.
And so I moved back to. I was actually living in Brisbane at the time when I was doing this, and then I moved back to Melbourne. And I was out at my club, and I decided I'll put a website up just showing what I'm doing. I made this shitty little website, and a couple of people saw it somehow and said, "Oh, hey, can we get some of those off you?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then so they came out to the club. One of those guys is now got his own cottage industry business going. Paul's 3D prints.
Yep.
He was organising the Healesville exhibition at the time, and said, "Oh, do you want to stand at the exhibition?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, all right, I'll give it a go." And then I thought, all right, now I've got to start making more of this stuff for this exhibition, and that was the beginning, and it's never ended.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's about 18 years ago, so 17 years ago. So,
really, that long?
Yeah, that long.
So you're
I've been doing it that long, my God.
You've been in like 5 or so years less than me.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I didn't actually know. I suppose. I mean, that's the thing is, I still think of half of the people that I've gotten to know as customers that have become friends as kids, like in their 20s and as teenagers and all of that. But they're not. They're actually in their 40s now. So and 30s and
I was early 30s at the time.
Time is happening.
Yeah. Ooh.
So radio and so with the 3D printing side of it, you do that with it in-house or you farm that out to a bureau or?
No, I have 2 3D printers sitting over my left shoulder here working at the moment actually.
Yep.
That's that's my left shoulder. Yeah, just check.
Yeah, it confuses me as well. The left and right, and then you add it into a screen, and it goes backwards half the time. It's sort of because when I started, we were all styrene patterns.
Yeah, well, that's what I was doing, styrene originally. In fact, most of my, I think the first 20 kits I put out were all styrene patterns.
So we ended up going to rapid prototype patterns or 3D printed patterns. But that was at the time when the machines you could buy were $5,000-$10,000 for the home machines, and they were garbage.
Yeah, that's right.
They really were. They could make a pixelated cube, maybe at a stretch, but so you'd have to use companies that would have these, $400,000 and $500,000 machines.
Yeah, correct. And that's what I sort of shifted to as well. Moved to sort of 3D prototyping, and then would become a master for the mold.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because you look at it and you go, right, these machines are great, which even by today's standards, you can buy a machine for $200 that outdoes these things.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could do it, and then you go, right, I wonder if there's actually a need for me to buy this machine. And then you'd look at it, and thankfully the companies I dealt with in Australia, they were actually quite upfront and honest, because they would sell the machines. And they'd say straight out, they just said, Adam, don't. Because this machine will be outdated within 6 months. And you will never produce enough stuff from it to pay for it, to not even come close. And they were right. And now you look at it, and you look at the machine over your shoulder. Barring size, that is better than a $500,000 machine from 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
it's insane.
And the thing is now that you can do a production run on one of these machines, and it pays for itself with the first kit you put out.
Yeah.
And then it's just ongoing maintenance and stuff, but the actual cost of the machine is covered very quickly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so realistically, they end up being a null cost when you actually look at what you're doing with them. And I mean, I bought an FDM machine, a Maker Gear M2.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and that was when it was the Duck's Guts. It was a Kickstarter program and all of that. It was, and it genuinely was the best that you could get at the time. That was, and it was only $2,000 US, and then there was all the extras and everything else. By the time I got it to me, it was $5,200 Australian. I was like, oh, that crept up. Anyway, rightio, we'll make stuff, and it was painful, but I did, the only things that I used to make a pattern for it was the tunnel portals that I did.
Really?
Yeah, they're actually made on that machine.
Oh, there you go.
Because I was just, come hell or high water, I've spent over $5,000 on this thing. It's going to make something.
With it.
And that was the only thing that was ever produced by Wuiske Models that had a pattern made on that machine. And then after that, I bought an Anycubic Photon.
Yep.
Right, as everyone did. They were cheap as chips. They were $800. What are they now? 99 or something?
Oh, it depends. So I run an Anycubic shop. I started with Anycubic, so I've just stuck with it because I know it and it works, and it's very easy to set up and get going. And each time they put a new one out, they get better.
Yep.
So yeah, I've just continued to run with Anycubic. So I know people out there who have different brands and multiple brands and running different machines, but the trick is every time if you change, you've then got to go re-slice every single file that you want to print.
Yeah.
Appropriate to that printer. So it's much easier if you have several of the same machine running, and you can just swap it back and forth between machines and start your printing. And not have to worry about
I've always been a big believer in that if you're going to set up a farm with these things, even a small scale farm, you want to go with the same across, because otherwise you're just asking for trouble.
And you're then duplicating and triplicating work.
That's right. And yeah, I mean it's I've got an Elegoo big thing. I forget what it is. That I've only used a couple of times.
It's your bathtub after a big weekend.
Sorry?
Your bathtub after a big weekend.
Oh, me and a cast of 5 or 6 others. Realistically, it's and the dog. It's big and it's got a big red thingy over it, and
full of Elegoo.
So full of Elegoo goodness. So right, I've only used it a few times, but it's impressive. It's basically just a photon just on steroids.
Yeah.
And that's I like these machines just because they're simple. They're actually quite simple. And I mean, so on the photon, I made patterns for the drum loads we did, for the pineapple bins, cattle loads, pretty much all of the loads and all of the line side accessories I did, like relay huts and things like that, were all done on that.
Yeah.
And they're just made from that, we make a silicon rubber mold, and you know the process, and then you just cast it,
Mm.
and that's it. So it really did. Excuse me. It sped up the process insanely.
Yeah.
I know the two things that changed my business were, one, when I outsourced the castings to the sadly now passed Nelson Kennedy over in New Zealand,
Mm-hmm.
and because that freed me up with time, and then using 3D printed masters, which improved the quality and the detail insanely, and then it just sped up the process with which I could produce kits.
Yeah.
And then that there was a knock-on effect of that, where it helped with the Australian O-scale market, because I was doing stuff for Peter Krause from O-Austin and all of that, and it was just the speed at which we could do it. It was actually quite horrific and insane, but we could do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I'm a big fan of it. The only thing I found that I hate and genuinely loathe and detest is the forums.
The forums.
Yep, the 3D printing forums, they are just nightmare fuel.
I stay away.
Yeah, I learnt my lesson repeatedly, because, to be sure. And very, very slowly, because they're one step away from a nuclear level argument.
Oh, yeah.
At any minute. And it's just... and they all start out trying to be helpful, but instead of just, Lyndon gives me a tip, and I say, sorry, thanks, Lyndon, but that one didn't actually work. Right? No, Lyndon will then fire back with, well, it must be something you're doing. Perhaps if
Yes.
you read your instructions, are you literate?
That's right.
And then it will escalate.
Everything I say is right.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, and they're kind of hilarious unless you actually need information. And then they're just horrific. So I learnt very quickly to leave the forums alone.
Yeah, they can be useful to scan through if you're looking for ideas, but just don't participate.
Exactly. Yeah, it's unfortunately there is that, shall we say, toxic element. And yeah, I find it really comical when I'm on the outside looking in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well is there's a difference between trying to do it on a scale where you can put a kit out versus people playing around to build stuff for themselves. Making
one or making 100 of one to get one that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're trying to put enough out that you can release a kit, it's a whole other kettle of fish.
That's it. And yeah, there is a very big difference. It's the same as I've said it to a couple of people that were starting out in the industry, is that they had the attitude of, I'm okay at making models, I'm pretty proficient at it, so I can therefore be a manufacturer. And it's sort of, well, no, the process for making a master or a pattern is very different from making a model. And then that's a pretty steep learning curve, isn't it?
Yeah, because you've got to think about how the whole thing's going to go together, how someone else is going to be able to do it. It's not something you can just sit there and go, okay, I've built the box, I've done this, I'll add the detail, whatever, blah, 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 and then my model is done.
Yep.
It's got to be like, okay, how are all these bits going to be in a state that I can duplicate them multiple times over, and then someone's going to be able to take these things and put them together to make that model.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also the element, sadly, of how can I also, which is something that we never consider when we start, which is how can I make this more difficult for some bastard whom has also discovered the Barnes website to throw some rubber over and copy and then sell to his friends.
Yeah, that's right. And I know there are copies of my stuff out there.
Yeah.
It happens.
What's your, just curious, what's your honest opinion on that? So people buying Lyndon's trains and then copying them. What's your actual thoughts on that as a manufacturer? I'm curious.
So look, it's all good and well to get uppity about it, and I know people do it, and it pisses me off.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's not worth going after them.
That's right.
Because it'll cost more than you'd ever recoup anyway.
Yes.
In terms of trying to go down a legal path. I guess the one thing I would say is it's rude, and they will possibly spend more money on rubber and resin copying a kit than they would just by buying a couple more of the kits.
It's funny you should mention that. The opinion that or the realization I've come to is, it is what it is. I'm not overly keen on people copying my stuff. However, you'll never stop it. But if you're copying it and selling it, I promise you and I will have words.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
And a good portion of them will probably start with F. But the thing is that I have actually, as you were just mentioning, I have actually come across people that have copied my stuff, and they've said, "Oh yeah, it took me. I went through this many kilos of rubber and this much resin to get like 2 models." And it's just
that's it. And the rubber. I mean, when I started out doing this, I since then I reckon the cost of the rubber and resin has gone up nearly 50% over that period. And so, what used to a bottle of resin that used to cost me, I think it was about $66 for 2 liters. That same bottle now would cost you $94. And I don't buy in 2 litre lots anymore.
Of course. I will say this: I actually believe the cost of rubber has come down proportionately.
Sorry?
I believe the cost of rubber has come down proportionately.
I don't know. The stuff I use is a lot more expensive than it used to be. But again, I buy much larger quantities now, so I'm not paying the small unit cost anymore.
The hobby price.
Yeah. So there are ways around it, and hence, I mean, kits I put out 15 years ago. There's several of them that the price is still the same as it was 15 years ago.
Yeah. So I was very much of the same opinion in that I very, very seldom have price rises.
Yeah. You kind of absorb these costs because it gets to a point where a kit can become, I'm not paying that for it, it's just too much money. And also what it does is it prevents people who haven't or aren't too proficient in kit building or working with certain materials. It will put them off having a go.
Well, that's an interesting
financial outlay is larger, and so I don't want to spend $60-$70 on a kit when I haven't really built much of this sort of stuff before, because if I stuff it up, I've wasted my money. And it's a big, for some people, $30-$40 difference. That could be quite a lot to them in their modern dollars. So
it's funny. You've sort of touched on a thing that. So there's a couple of conversations in there that we've had in the chat, the Friday night chats. They were somewhat more colourful in those conversations. But so first of all, the pricing side of things, in that I genuinely believe, and you'd be in the same camp, in that we're in the industry, we know what things cost. And true or false, there is a few manufacturers out there that, to put it bluntly, are just taking the piss.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like they really are. And my question to those people, because I've had a few very frank discussions with these people, and where it's just, well, how much money do you need off that one product?
That's it.
Right, and it doesn't, to me, it doesn't help the hobby. It does damage to the hobby. And it means that, you buy an item and that becomes a prized possession because you exchanged XYZ amount of, modern currency for it, when it should just be something that you're looking, oh yeah, I need 50 of these or 20 or whatever, and all of that. But there is that whole situation where I think there are certain people within the industry that are just greedy, basically. And you and I know it and could rattle off some names quite interestingly, I'm sure.
But we shan't.
But we shan't. It has happened in the chat. It definitely has happened. So, yeah. But the thing is that I think if you can find a happy price point that the customers are happy with, and if you can set it up so that there is a retail margin in there to get it into shops, then you're laughing. It all works for the hobby. And, well, look, you found my stuff in Emerald.
Yeah, that's right. And you can find my stuff, free plug for Aurora Trains up in Brisbane.
Yep.
But you can find my stuff in strange places as well.
Well, without going into too much detail in this particular format, let's just say I'm not on George's Christmas card list. And yes, he and I had a moral disagreement. And yes, so we'll just say that. Sorry.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's not dwell on it. It's in the past.
Oh, exactly. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. And that's the thing. It's actually quite a comical thing because it wasn't a quiet, behind closed doors type of thing. It was made fairly public, and it just, so everyone has an opinion on it, and I think it's hilarious. So
yeah, I think we've all been caught in situations at various points. I was in Canberra one year where two manufacturers who I happened to both be very good mates with weren't so good mates with each other, and decided to have a bit of a tete-a-tete in the middle of the exhibition, and I'm stuck in the middle, and then I'm like, nah, don't bring me into this. I'm your mate, I'm staying out of this shit. But that happens, and it's all good.
There was one about 15 years ago or more. There was two manufacturers that genuinely hated each other, that happened to get into a similar discussion, and I was in the middle, and I wouldn't say I was friends with either of them, but I got along well with them, and I worked with them.
Yeah.
And so very much the same as what you're saying, and I do know the story because you've told it to me. And where it was just, well, what do you think, Adam, and all of that. And it was about models in the industry. And my response was, well, all of that aside, I still can't believe that you said his wife's a fat mole. So it just started this full-on argument, which was complete fabrication. It was just, and I'm just there giggling like a schoolgirl.
Yep.
But they weren't arguing about the industry anymore.
Oh, that's good. At least you got them off topic.
And the audience could sort of see, and there was a few of them that were laughing. It was great fun. I thought if you're going to create a spectacle, at least make it entertaining.
That's it.
But I think there is a lot of people in this industry that take it far too serious. And I know you and I have had discussions about some of the underhanded things that certain Australian manufacturers, big and small, I'll stress the word big, have done to undermine each other, and it's genuinely, they need their crayons taken off them.
No, it's just not worth the effort. I mean, I don't understand why people want to do that. I don't know. I personally, I don't see the point in getting into an argument with someone, or getting angry about something, or trying to do something to someone, because it's just, the negative energy is not good for you and it's not good for the hobby. So I kind of steer away from that sort of shit.
I tend to steer away from any conversation that involves negative or positive or any other flavour of energy, because it's getting a bit close to tie-dyeing and hemp smoking for my liking. I mean, the next step is that we start doing drum circles, and I'm just crap at that.
All holding hands and
all of that sort of stuff, and singing Kumbaya and all of that. You know, I mean,
when I eventually get up to yours, we can do that.
Traditionally, when I sing anything, the RSPCA gets involved, because
because they think a dog's being strangled, or because dogs actually start trying to strangle?
No, they think it's an entire species of dog being strangled.
Right.
So it's one of those things. But yeah, I try and just have fun with it, you know, because if you can't have fun, then what's the point? This is speaking for myself, and I want to hear your take on this. Is that this is something I never intended to do. It was an accidental business. Actually, I mean, I was approached. So I've said this story on other in seminars and things like that. That I was approached to make models for the Workshops Rail Museum. Right? What I haven't said was it got to a point where they needed more models than I could supply, because everything was handmade. Right?
Yeah.
And so the bit that was never said was that I started phoning around trying to find who could supply me with castings.
Okay.
And that's all well and good. The first guy I spoke to, who is still kind of in the industry, everyone in QR modelling knows him. This is the first conversation. He said to me, he said, I could, but just so that you know, I own the Queensland market. And he said, so everything that's done for it comes through me. And my exact words to him were, wow.
Not anymore.
no offense, sir. I was just trying to make a couple of hundred models. That was it. That wasn't my business. I wasn't making trains. And I just said, no offense. I said, but you've got to be the most arrogant wanker I've ever had the misfortune of speaking to.
And how did it go down?
He just said, oh, well, that's your opinion, and hung up the phone. So that was my first introduction into the industry, outside of Joni and Rusty from Hannahvale, whom I'd known since I was a kid.
Oh, I love those two.
Oh, absolutely. I call Joni Mum.
Yeah. They're a beautiful pair, those two.
They are the most lovely people, the most giving people. They will do anything for anyone. And what I love is how Rusty has this moniker attached to him where people think he's grumpy. He's not. Yeah, I've never encountered that. I know Joni can shoot viper's vomit when she needs to. But if she does, there's a good reason for it. You have done something. But yeah, so on the same day when I very professionally introduced myself to this person over the phone, I then rang a hobby shop in Brisbane, which people still know, and I just said, oh yeah, g'day, it's Adam Wuiske from Wuiske Promotions, was the name of the business. And I said, look, I've been approached to make a heap of models for the Workshops Rail Museum for their opening. I said, I need castings. I said, I know you used to do this stuff and this stuff. And he turned around and he said, I'm happy to have this discussion, but everything you make, there'd need to be some sort of royalty or something, because I actually control the Queensland market. And I thought...
And that person who controls it.
I thought, this is sounding vaguely familiar. And I just said, would you believe? I said, you're actually the second person that's told me this in the last 2 hours. I said, I said, you'll have to forgive me, but I'm going to say to you exactly the same thing I said to them, with a slight difference. Is I said, you've got to be the second most arrogant wanker I've had the misfortune of speaking to today. And so that's genuinely what happened. That was my introduction into the industry. And I didn't care. It's not what I was doing to make a living. This was just a little sideline thing I was asked to do, and I'll do that. And of course, now 25 years later, one of those people I worked with for quite a few years, I was supplying, and then the other one was part of a little cabal that was not a fan of Adam Wuiske, which that's fine. But weirdly, out of that little cabal, he was actually the guy who I got along with the best. He would actually have a chinwag with me and quietly send me photographs and things like that and help me out. It was a very strange situation, but that was my first introduction into the politics and the crap that goes on in this industry.
Yeah, I didn't really learn much about the politics till I hit the exhibition scene, and then I started to learn things and hear things on the grapevine, and it was all very interesting. But oddly enough, a lot of the stuff I heard about people was quite the opposite of my experience of them. I know. John Easy had a reputation, and he was a good mate. He's a fantastic mate. He was actually the first to help me out and get started with actually being able to put more into my kits and that sort of stuff. And then Phil Badger came along, and he's helped me out a lot as well. And Brian Comport from Train World as well. All these guys have been, sort of the backbone of my support line for the last 15, 17 years as I grew the business. So, I've had great times, great experiences with all these people. But you hear things out there. You see it on Facebook, keyboard warriors out there having a go and all that sort of stuff. But,
John Easy was a big disappointment to me, as we've discussed this, because I'd never spoken to him. We'd never crossed paths and all of that. And I'd heard how obnoxious a person he was and this and that and the other. And I had consistently heard just bad things about him. And then I rang him. I had to ring him. There was his C-van, as I mentioned, was made in the same factory as one of our models. And and a photo appeared of it when it shouldn't have, because it didn't officially exist. No one knew about it. And I rang him to deliver the news and say, hey, you might want to get on with these people. And I found him to be an utter delight. I was quite disappointed, because I was ringing expecting fire and brimstone from all the stories I'd heard over the years. And he was a great guy.
He was actually, it was funny because, I put a kit out. It was the Victorian Railways 4-cell flower wagon. And I put the kit out, and John wanted to...
Sorry, is that the one, because I'm not up on Victorian stuff, is that the one that Southern Rail did and someone else... And SDS did it?
SDS did it as well, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one where Southern Rail decided to do the detail parts by pad printing them instead of actually...
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the wagon I'm talking about. So I put it out, and John comes up to me in exhibition and goes, "Oh, look, just a heads up, this is happening." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Do you know when?" And he's like, "Yeah, blah blah blah." I was like, "That's all right. I'll sell enough before then, so that's fine." Oddly enough, when they came out, because they came out in 3 packs, I think it was, from both manufacturers, my kit sales went up because people wanted to add just one more wagon, or decided, hey, I like those wagons, but I only want one of them. So it actually, and I found that a couple of times where I've had kits that have come out either ready to run, that it actually can help boost the sales rather than wipe you out. So it's not a thing I worry about anymore, actually. It's just...
I
Sprinter was another one, actually, when I released my Sprinter kit.
Who did the Sprinter? That was On Track, wasn't it?
On Track, yeah. Graham comes over to me at Caulfield one year and says, "Oh, hey, by the way, just so you know, we've got this company." And, these are sort of, at the time, confidential conversations because they hadn't announced these things. These manufacturers hadn't announced what was coming out, but they were just giving me a heads up. And so, yeah, I've found that they've been really good like that. And every time it's only benefited me rather than really anything.
I actually found the sprinters, again, my knowledge and interest in Victorian stuff is minimal at best. But the sprinters I am vaguely familiar with because I actually had the drawings for them.
Right.
Like the 3D drawings for that model when Craig and Graham were doing it. And my favourite part was the curtain. In the cab, there's a curtain. It was just beautifully done. So when you're doing injection moulding, there's no such thing as a vertical surface. They're all on they have a bit of draft on them to get them out of the mould. And so you've got this wavy curtain that is also tapered. And it was a geometrical nightmare. and so I was talking to Graham one day, and on Skype, I believe it was, and we were talking, and I was just, mate, that curtain, he was trying to tell me about something to do with the way the chassis worked in with the interior. And I kept getting sidetracked by this curtain. I was just, mate, that is a work of art. I said, no one will ever notice it. I said, but that is just beautiful. In that, like, I know how difficult that is to produce from a geometric point of view and to make it work. And it must have bored him to tears. I just kept talking about this bloody curtain. And he's like, yeah, Adam,
I like curtains.
So I must have sounded like a genuine 24-karat gold-plated, fuel-injected moron. But it just little things like that fascinate me.
Yeah.
In that you've got a problem and how do you the ways for overcoming it fascinate me. Whereas a lot of companies or a lot of factories, what they would have done was they would have made that piece, which is vertical, obviously. They would have made it a separate piece and just done it horizontally in the mould because it's easy to make then. It just means someone's got to put it in. And yeah, I just that was my favourite bit of the whole model. So radio. So yeah.
Good on you and your curtain loving.
See, when you say it like that, it sounds like something where there should be guys in blue uniforms with Alsatians coming to visit me.
Either that or maybe you hiding behind the curtain.
They're just twitching a bit. But yeah, it's just little things like that I love. Because it's thinking outside the box. Which, as you know, people don't really do that much anymore.
Yeah, it's a shame. And it's one of those things where there are certain things I think are becoming lost arts.
Yes.
Because we're getting to the point where, it's harder to sell kits now than it was 10 years ago. Not because people don't want the wagon or that there's a ready-to-run version available, but people, I don't know whether it's more time poor or less adventurous in pushing their own skills and their own abilities.
Yeah.
And trying to learn. Because I think one of the biggest satisfactions you get out of this hobby is, and especially for me, mine is around building. Once I've got a layout built, I don't want to operate it. I just want to push it, turn it on, and let the trains go. I don't care. Once I get to that,
mate, you need to come here. I will fix that.
Yeah.
Aside from being Victorian, that's one of your other defects. There's probably medication available for this.
I can't wait to see all 2,500 meters of your layout just running on its own, so I don't have to touch it. I can just sit there and watch trains.
Well, this is the thing. Is so with mine. So my layout actually comes from. There's only about 4 or 5 people that know this. So my interest was when I was a kid. I actually spent some time in the Royal Children's Hospital in Brisbane, and I discovered that from the bathroom or the thing that they had, you could look out the window and it looked out over Normanby Yards.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated at the amount of movement and just it was constant.
Yeah. It was around that time they diagnosed you with megalomania, wasn't it?
Oddly, no. That's what everyone thinks, but it's actually there is a funny story there in that the people that don't know me genuinely think I'm this egotistical asshole, which the last bit's true. But there is a point, and it used to happen at shows, and where people would come up and they would give praise to me, and my brain doesn't handle that well, so I used to disappear for a smoke. Mm-hmm. I just need to go and be by myself for 5 minutes, and then come on back in, and
then when you come back in, they're still down on their knees. We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
Not quite, but you know what it's like. There are a few overly enthusiastic people, we'll say.
I guess you could call them the groupies of the model railway fraternity.
Yeah, I've never actually worked out how to explain this to people, because if you go outside into the real world with the humans and try and explain this, people think you are 100% delusional and just off the planet. But then when you go to a show, people actually see it, and they're just like...
And they're like, oh, wow.
That's a bit weird. And you're like, yeah, I know. I'm aware of this. I just make trains. That's it.
One of my favourite moments was at Caulfield, at the Caulfield exhibition, the AMA exhibition, 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm standing there having a chat with Will James. And this little kid, who was probably about 7 or 8, comes up to him. I was like, oh, you're Will James. He's like, yep. He's like, can I have your autograph?
Okay. I have one when we did...
I thought, that's awesome. That's so cool.
The last Brisbane show at the RNA Showgrounds in the old Horticultural Pavilion, we were there, and it used to take me like half an hour to go for a pee. Yeah. Right? So I'd bundle in having a smoke and all this sort of stuff because it took forever to get away from the stand. And then you'd have to fight your way through a cast of thousands. And because of the long hair and Wuiske models written across the back of the shirt and all of that, every week you get about 10 feet and someone would stop you to ask you something. Right? But I actually had someone sort of put their hand on my shoulder, and I turned around, oh, g'day, how you going? And they said, you're Adam Wuiske. And I went, I know that. And they said, can I have your autograph? And I was like, and you check to make sure it's not a blank check or something. And yeah, it's happened a few times, and it's very, very surreal and very strange. And yeah, I assume it's later used in some effigy burning thing.
I've never had anyone come up to me and ask me for my autograph at an exhibition, but I was at the Melbourne show one year with one of my mates, and this group of girls come up and say, oh, you play for the Brisbane Lions, don't you? And I'm just like, yeah. So, oh, can we have your autograph? I'm like, yeah.
You played for the Brisbane Lions?
I don't know who they thought I was. I've only played like 3 games of AFL, not AFL, but football in my life. But they thought I looked like someone who played football. So
did you actually play for the Brisbane Lions?
No.
Oh, right. No. Okay. So you were just going along with it.
I did used to hang out with them because when I used to work for AAPT, and AAPT was their major sponsor during their back-to-back era. Yep. So they'd come into the office quite a lot, and they'd have after-work functions where they'd come in and that sort of stuff. So, so during that era, did meet a lot of them and chat a lot with them. But
so you're going to have to educate me here, but Brisbane Lions are what sport? I know it involves a ball.
AFL.
Right, that's that Victorian thing.
No, it's the national sport now. It's the premier national sport. Well, it's really the only national sport. There isn't any other game.
Can you just wipe your lip?
Sure.
Yep, there's a lot of bullshit dribbling. So righty, because I mean, look, I'm not up on sports. I just yay sports team. But like my entire sporting.
Since you're not up on sports, it's time you probably took an adopted one.
It's really not.
welcome to the Melbourne Football Club. It's great to have you with us. As a member of 20 years, I'm very proud that you are now wanting to...
Why is it that... I understand the words that you said, but the way that was translated by my brain cell between my ears when I heard them was basically the equivalent of saying, I've got my 20-year token for being sober.
No, I wasn't sober.
Right. Well, that's obvious. It's just it is funny in that. So I mean, everyone who knows I absolutely take the piss out of Victorians just because they deserve it. But there is a reason for it, and that's because. So obviously, being Queensland, we are narrow gauge, or as I call it, standard gauge.
Oh, we just call it narrow-minded.
There is that possibility. That could be mildly true. However, the New South Wales guys, we get along with quite well, and we've always got the state of origin if they ever get too big for their boots, right?
Yes.
And so then it's a case of the Victorians, I find, have this weird, especially within our hobby, they have this weird ego, and they do things differently. And I've always said that Victorian modelers would make square wheels. And if you ever questioned it, they would say, that's just the way we do it, and it's the way we've always done it.
I think there is one interesting thing I find that's very prevalent in Victorian, or the hobby in Victoria, and that is, if it's not blue and gold, I don't care.
See, this is an argument I have with New South Welshmen and Victorians, in that which sees me on the wrong side of the fence for everything, is that if you're talking liveries for New South Wales, I actually like the candy livery, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of, and it's probably similar reason because we're both close in age.
Yes. I should point out that Lyndon's actually older than me, which makes me very happy, except the fact that he doesn't look older than me. That I dislike immensely.
I'm a beautiful specimen, I am.
And modest.
But I grew up more in the V-line era.
Yeah.
Which is also the candy era.
Well, the V-line livery is my favourite Victorian livery as well.
Yeah, and the Australian national green and gold.
Yep, same.
That's my natural sort of. I like that color. I like that range of color schemes. So.
But see, my reason for liking those.
If it's, I don't understand why they won't get into the modern stuff if they only like blue and gold, because PN's blue and gold.
Well, okay, so let's look at it realistically. Let's look at the.
I'm going to get punched in the face at the next exhibition I go to, but anyway.
It's fine. You just pretend it's for one of the things you actually deserve, and you'll be fine.
Yes.
But okay, so let's look at the blue and gold livery, and let's look at that. I forget what they call it. I'm not really interested. The brown and gold livery that New South Wales had. So you've got the New South Wales livery of brown and gold, right?
I believe they call it. No, it doesn't actually say what it is on it.
It's not Tuscan, is it?
No. Yes. Well, there's the Indian red. No, it's Indian red.
Right. Well, obviously, saying that nowadays is probably a hate crime or something like that, and the UN needs to be notified, right? However, let's be realistic. It's brown with a bit of gold. It's basically the colour of something my dog does out in the yard, and someone's put gold pinstriping on it. That's not something to brag about. And then the Victorians have gone one step better. They've deprived it of oxygen, so it's turned blue, right? And then put gold pinstriping on it. So this is not something to be proud of, people.
Maybe you could pick up these things that your dog's doing in the yard, put wheels on it, and sell them as a kit.
Oh, there's so many comments to say there. They'll end up with border security checks and everything if I keep going on that. So I'll leave that one alone.
I mean, the quality's probably better than your normal stuff.
Well said. I'll pay that. May a down and out tooth fairy come along and mug your gums, mate. But the thing is, so the candy livery I love because it's stupid. In that it doesn't weather well.
Sort of Castlemaine rock type lolly.
Yeah, but from a weathering perspective, it's just awful, which is what I love about it. And as a modeler, I like weathering, and
nothing worse than going to an exhibition, seeing these layouts that are so amazingly detailed with shiny plastic.
Oh, it does my head in, and the and then the V-line livery is the same.
Yeah, we should probably state all opinions stated in this video are held by us and ourselves. We are not.
Of course, and they are actually correct. Just deal with it. But yeah, it's and the same as the Australian national livery. Who the hell decides to paint bogies yellow? Right, it's
cool.
That's going to work basically until the paint dries.
Yeah, and as soon as the next sort of wind comes through,
yep,
it's like a bit of dust up.
Well, when you're going across the Nullarbor plain, where there happens to be a little bit of it, it's just I love these liveries because they just weather, and the variations you get. It's the same as with the QR Blue livery. It was actually not too bad for weathering, but it was also shocking. And the beautiful part is because Queensland's so big and there's so much variation in the climate and everything else, you could take two locomotives that are identical from different parts of the state, put them together, and they were completely different colours. Mm-hmm. And I like that. As a modeler, that becomes interesting.
I find it's it's more real.
And it's the same as I've heard many arguments, and I mean full-on arguments, about the colour of the red for Queensland Rails, the old timber coaching stock we had. And it's like, guys, I remember this as a kid, going over the flyover on the Ferny Grove line and looking down at main yards and seeing this sea of red coaches just sitting there. And there was no two the same colour.
Same colour, yeah, exactly.
And people will get into these do or die arguments about it. And what I love, again, as a modeler, is when you can have multiples of the same vehicle, but they're all different colours. Or they've all got, as they did in the late 70s, early 80s, they started putting the logo on things in yellow. And you can have three vehicles the same, and the logos are all in different spots. Right? It's just... It was obviously the person whom was designing and laying out the corporate branding or standards or whatever we'd call it today was obviously mildly schizophrenic. And I like that. It adds interest. But you do see, and you've seen it at shows where people will get into these insanely passionate debates about colours.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I know of one situation which is probably ridiculous because arguments over colours has broken up a friendship. But the things people can fight over or get narky about it's just silly. It's just
It is, but you've got to admit it is entertaining from the background.
Yeah, some of it. and
where you just genuinely, and I have said this, where you just stand back and you just go, does it hurt when you think of these things? Right? And I do find an interest in these things, but it does get to the point of absurdity where you either have to jump in and get angry with both peanuts involved in said argument, or you just have to laugh.
Yeah. And ultimately, someone walks past my layout and goes, "That's not right." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. That's what I wanted."
Well, I made it, so yes.
I made it the way I wanted it. Yeah.
Well, I actually, when I first announced my the layout when I built this shed, I said, about how big the layout is and all of that. There was a guy that put a comment on one of the posts where I showed the basic layout of the shed and the track plan and all of that, or the bench work plan. And he put something in there to the effect of, well, if you'd used any forethought or intelligence, you would have designed it to be portable. And it's
Are you planning on taking the whole shed somewhere, eh?
Well, the layouts, the framework is 90% done. It's nearly 5 ton, right? And what am I doing? Bringing lindors in with a crane and running 40-foot curtain-sided trailers or something like it just. But this guy doubled down on it and actually sent me messages about how stupid I was, how arrogant I was, and all of that, because I didn't make this layout a portable exhibition layout.
That's too. No.
And he really.
I haven't seen it, but I've seen you walk me through it.
Yeah.
On video, so it's like that's never going anywhere.
Well, the standard reaction is everyone that walks through the door, just over here, the minute they do, they stop and they go, "You're insane." That's it. And
well, yeah,
yeah.
Well, yeah, or I would probably. My response would probably be, "I need a shed this big."
Well, there is a lot of shed envy that happens. But the thing is what I was saying earlier about Normanby Yards. That was what really
your inspiration.
My inspiration. So I always wanted to model Normanby, and then on the Wuiske Models channel, there is that video which I filmed when I was a teenager, and basically it was just to show the amount of activity there used to be back when we had a working train set. The problem was I always wanted to model Normanby, but then as I grew and I started getting into operations, I worked out that Normanby Yards is effectively a staging yard with trees. And so it becomes as boring as a pacifist pistol because they don't do anything, they don't go anywhere. And so it's sort of, oh, well, if you're going to model that, you need to add to it, and then add to it, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And then the opportunity came up to buy this block and build this shed and all the rest of that, and so it was like, bugger it, let's do it. And I did find my hobby changed when, with the first layout I built in Jandowie, which everyone went ooh and ah over because that was 35 feet by 25 feet, which at the time was the biggest personal layout ever done for Queensland. And I got interested in operations because of the people. And cool, okay, that was a whole new element that I'd never experienced. And then I modified that layout and added a couple of branch lines and this and that and the other. To which, when I removed some portions of that layout, I actually got death threats. No kidding. When I removed Thorn Gully from the old layout, someone said, I did an Adams Corner where I said, oh, I'm going to have to remove it because I'm going to add an extra branch line and an extra yard because there was only one main yard. And it was big, but it was boring. And someone said, oh, you can't do that, that's the best part of the layout, and in fact, if you do, I will personally shoot you in the head. Okay, tell me what you really think.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's great.
Obviously, that part of the layout had made a very serious impression on that individual, and you should be proud of the impact you've had on someone's life.
Yeah, but the best thing I ever did was removing it because it opened up that area so I could do other things. And then with the next layout that was built, I got the amount of ire that I received for ripping that layout out completely and then starting again was just insane. But then once I did it, everyone loved it, and it was more operator friendly. And we had brilliant operations when we had the Wuiske Models barbecues. And that really opened my eyes to a whole other side of the hobby that I'd never really looked at. And I had a great time. I loved it. So it went from there. And then with this layout, well, this one's designed, I mean, the last layout, the maximum you could have running comfortably was 12 people. Just because you started stepping on each other's toes. It wasn't big enough. Whereas this one, we think, hopefully, we should comfortably be able to have 40, 50 people operating. And it will cater to different needs. If you want to do the mainline hustle and bustle sort of stuff, that's there. You can do that. If you want to do just little branch line shunts and all the rest of that, you can do that. If you want to just spend your time switching in a yard, you can do that in multiple locations. If you want to do any sort of in between of any of those roles, you can. And
press the button and just watch trains go around. You
can. But yeah, so because the suburban line is a very large double track loop from Roma Street to Caboolture, and it's I think it's about 250 feet, 300 feet between the two. And so where the trains in real life at Roma Street disappear through the tunnel and come out at Central, in my world they disappear, go about 20 something feet and then reappear at Caboolture. And then they go down the two peninsulas and do that. So they will be running continuously. So even when it's just me operating by myself, I've still got to work in amongst that. Because I've found that when you have medium to large layouts, if you are running them by yourself, they get very boring. And yeah, if you've got more things operating, it just adds extra interest. And yeah, so as I said before, we will change this and get you into the operation side of it, because it is... I've never seen anyone do it and not get into it.
We used to do operations out at the club layout. So I started out as the Warrenbite Model Railway Club. It's now the Arabelli Model Railway Club. But we've got, despite the fact I'm in northern New South Wales now.
Well, you're getting there. You're only a few steps or a few kilometres away from getting citizenship or a passport or learning the language, really.
Yeah, I've just got to walk that way, 2 kilometres, and I'll get there.
Yeah, so
over the back of the mountains here.
So we actually, so if you are, when you cross the border, being that you're now technically a New South Welshman, and you come into Queensland, does that class you as artificial intelligence when you come over the border?
Certainly superior intelligence.
It's funny. We get into these discussions about the state of origin and all of that, and what is it, about once every 10 years we let New South Wales win just because otherwise they cry. You know, yeah. I love it. You look at it through Faceplant, and I don't follow any sport, right? And you see it coming up for a month beforehand. All these people, the Blues are going to smash it, and it's like, based on what? Right? You're effectively saying the Titanic's going to beat that iceberg this time, right? We've seen the movie, we've read the books, we know what happens, right? And then on the rare occasions when they do win, New South Wales was superior and they did this and this and this. It's like, no, we very deliberately fielded a team of retarded glove puppets just this once so that you could win. And that was only because there was a global shortage of tissues from all the tears. So anyway, sorry, carry on about, you were saying about how good New South Wales is.
No, actually, I was talking about the club layout and how we were...
Oh, yeah, you were too. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
And it was based on Bacchus Marsh, so it was single line out of Bacchus Marsh in either direction towards Adelaide and towards Melbourne. So we had to run, like you were saying, multiple people controlling the layout. You know, and, I mean, yes, you could just set a train going and run it around on its own, but yeah, you can't really do much operationally unless you have more than one or two people, a couple of extra people there, because you want to run trains in opposite directions and try and, smash them into each other on top of the whatever it is, dog belly, I can't remember the name of the bridge, but, it'd be a spectacular fall if they did. So yeah, I have done operational things. I have run operational layouts. Boring. No. I think there's a difference, though. I mean, there's a difference between having a home layout and an exhibition layout.
Oh, absolutely.
Operational layouts don't work for exhibitions.
No.
Because you have general public who are coming to see trains.
Yeah, they're literally doing the all squirrel moment.
To see trains going round and round. And no matter how good the layout is, no matter how prototypically accurate you make it, no matter what, they don't know what that is. They just want to see trains going around.
Yep. Yep.
So, you know, and I think there's a difference between designing a home layout and an exhibition layout. And home layout, you can do whatever you want. In your case, you can, you know, fill half of Queensland with it, and yeah.
No, it's
operational behemoth.
It's nowhere near that big, but yeah, it's something that to my idea was, if you're having industries on a layout, you need to have a sympathetic industry for it, for somewhere for them to go. And then because of the size of this one, I sort of went a bit crazy and thought, well, there's actually a whole production chain. So what's the next step from point A to point B? It takes a different product that is made from the first product into point C, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, everything serves a purpose. And I like that. And so there's a guy, Peter Sanderson, who used to run the Brisbane show. I get on quite well with Pete, and we normally we'll have a conversation every few months, and it'll go for 2 or 3 hours, because he has a layout that is slightly bigger than my previous one, and it is all built around operations. And so he has spent 20-something years making all the mistakes. Whereas I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm hopefully, touch wood, learning from them. But you only learn by doing them, by making those mistakes, and working out what's a problem and what's not, what you can live with, what you can't. And so, yeah, it's good to talk to those people, because there's not that many of them out there.
Yeah, I remember my first mistake in model train land. And I had a layout in my bedroom, and it was on a tape, it was on a door, and I had a loop going around and a couple of sidings, and I decided I wanted to put an extra way of crossing through the middle of the layout back to the other track. And so when I did it, I created a reversing loop without knowing what the hell a reversing loop was.
Yep.
And I was, you know, and I got all frustrated. I was probably about 14 at the time. And, you know, it was cracking the shits, and I'd done all this scenery around it, and I'd put it in, and I'd built this tunnel over it out of plaster and all this stuff. And Dad gets home from work, and he's going, "Oh, you've created a reversing loop, you idiot." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, you can't do that because you're switching the electricity around on itself." And I'm like, "Oh, so what happens?" He goes, "Well, you're going to have to cut it and put a section in."
Yep.
I'm like, "What do you mean?" And then, and so that was my first hard lesson.
Well,
and, yeah.
So mine was when I was 8.
Get out and built a new one.
when I was 8, I always wanted a train set, and so the choice was given to me: you can have a train set, or you can have a Lego train. And
my first was a Lego train.
Sorry?
My first was a Lego train.
Yeah, well, I had friends at school that had Lego trains, and yeah, they were cool.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and so I picked a train set, and I got a Tyco Rock Island train set. It was like an F7 or F9 or whatever it is, a caboose, box car, and a coal hopper, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that was fine. And now my father said, "Oh, well, we better set this up for the boy." So he went to Jim Costello, J&J Hobbies, to the old shop there, and he said, "Well, what you..." And no, sorry, he didn't go there for a bit. Right, he went there. Someone told him that you need to lay your track on cork. So my father, I have no idea where this came from, right? But he went out and bought an 8-foot by 4-foot sheet of 1-inch thick cork. Right?
Right.
Because all he knew was you put the track on cork. right? And right, okay, and I can still remember the smell of it. Just sat there for years, right? And under the house, just the smell. And then it was sort of, okay, so he worked out, yeah, that's not quite what they meant. That yes, the information was correct, but it was a bit overly brief. And so yeah, it was the 8 foot by 4 foot sheet of ply, and then cork underlay, and this and that and the other. And it went from there, and made structures out of matchsticks and this and that and the other, and then went to J&J Hobbies, and my father bought a Bachmann GP50 in Union Pacific for himself, and another Jeep 50 in Burlington Northern for my brother, in the hope of getting him into it, which never really happened. And then he bought himself the DD40X, right? And this behemoth going on this little oval of track, and yeah. And then he also bought a video, which I've still got, I just don't have a mechanism for playing it, about the DD40s.
Yeah. And
so there's conversations we've had about in the past in the chat about DD40s and EMD versus Alco and GE and all of that in the competition that they had building this 6,000 horsepower unit, which that was the brief. And that's where my knowledge of it and all of that comes from, is from that video, and then I just became interested in it, and it went from there. But I remember going into Jim's shop at stupid o'clock on some night, because it was open of a night time. And there was Jim sitting on his chair behind the counter, drinking a coffee, holding court, with this wall of blue earthen boxes behind him. And if you remember what they were like, they just had this little tiny printed on a white panel what they were. And people would just say, oh, I need Santa Fe, da-da-da-da-da. And he'd just get up and walk over and just grab a blue box out of the mountain of boxes. He just knew where everything was, and everyone was just standing around, drinking coffee and talking. And I just fell in love with that, because I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could go to these shops at night and talk shit, yeah. And that was my introduction to the hobby, and I fell in love with it. And I think you've been present for some of the 5,000 or so conversations we've had in the chat about this, is that I actually think that's one of the most detrimental things to our hobby, is that is dying. There is a lot of the retailers now are just, shut up, give me your money, go away. And it's more about that rather than sharing the passion for the hobby and everything else. And I mean, I know without even asking that you've done this, because we all have, where you go to a shop to buy XYZ, you spend an hour or so there having a chinwag, consume copious quantities of coffee or do whatever and all of that. You walk out having spent half the Liberian foreign deficit, bought 5,000 different things, none of which are items XYZ, right? And then it's, oh shit, I need to go back and do this again. Bugger. Right? But that's what our hobby's built on.
That's it, yeah. There used to be a shop in Bendigo called Southline, run by this guy called Charles. And I knew if I walked in there on a Saturday, that was my Saturday.
Yeah.
Because you sit around, talk for ages, drink I don't know how much coffee, smoke how many cigarettes or whatever. And he had his model the layout Southline in his shed, and he was a massive SAR fan, so he was all South Australian stuff. It was really nice layout too, and his models were amazing as well. But yeah, so then, well, shut the shop at 1, it's pretty quiet, let's go play trains for the afternoon. And then go in and so, but you know what, you go back to those people because it's fun. You actually get to spend time talking about it, having a gym where you get to play trains, whatever it is, but it's an experience, it's not just a purchase.
That's the thing, and that's where you make friends, you learn. you learn things, and you just go in and you just sponge. You just absorb all of this information, and it changes your interest. It changes your hobby, and really develops and fosters your passion. And I think it's bloody damn near criminal that it's not happening anymore, because it's more about dollars and cents. And I think we need to be, as people in the industry, I think we need to be working to try and keep that side of it going, because that's really what the hobby was built on. You know, and so I mean, I used to catch a train up to Nunda, and I'd walk over to 88 Buckland Road to the turntable, Joni and Rusty, and this is when I was 10, 11 year old, right? Nowadays, 10 and 11 year olds are chauffeur driven everywhere, because heaven forbid the idea that they go anywhere, you know, without being, you know, a police escort or whatever it is. And so I'd go there and I'd spend most of the day there. And, you know, you had to fight your way through the wall of cigarette smoke to get in the door. And
it's like a pub in the good old days.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, and
atmosphere.
So you had to do that, and then there was always a cast of thousands there. Like, it was packed. I mean, that shop was not huge, but they used every inch of it. The aisleways were fairly narrow and all of that, but they were just packed, floor to ceiling, and then you threw all of these bodies in there, right? You came out looking like you'd spent the last 10 years in the rainforest, because, you know, it was just always hot. Well, this is my recollection of it. And then, you know, you went out the back door. There was a little, like a carport thing out the back where Rusty used to build some layouts and things like that. And you were looking straight out over the North Coastline.
Oh, cool.
So it was right there, and just there was like a 20-foot embankment sort of thing. And yeah, and so it was an experience, and it was something that you just thoroughly enjoyed and looked forward to. And it's funny, I've spoken to quite a few people my own age and younger that they have no recollection of these things, and they were sort of they genuinely feel like they missed out. And when I did the Whiskey Models barbecues, it was kind of that. It's just the only difference was people had to drive at the time where I was. It was 4 hours to get there, which I thought you needed your head ready if you did that, just to come and play trains. But people did. A lot of people did. And yeah, so, you know, that's the whole purpose behind everything I'm building here, is to do the same thing again. It was great fun.
Yep.
Absolutely killed me, but it was fun, because I used to turn on the layout at 10 o'clock in the morning. I used to say, anyone that turns up before that, things will get thrown at you. And so Saturdays, 10 a.m, there'd just be these people just turn up, and then there were no windows or anything in the layout room, and there were no clocks. So everyone used to call it the casino.
Yes.
And so we'd get to about lunchtime, and I'd say, who's getting hungry? We might fire up the barbie, right? And when enough people would whinge, we'd go out and fire up the barbie. But usually we'd open the door and the sun had gone. It was 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. And so we've been going for 9-10 hours, and it's felt like 20 minutes.
And none of the trains have still reached their destination.
No. And you know, we'd solved all of the world's problems, as you do, as we do on a Friday night, you know, and then in the process we'd had a good time and everything else. And so we'd have a feed, and people would be sort of walking back and forth because, I've still got such and such a train running, I just need to check on it. Yep, it's fine. So back out they come. And the earliest I ever switched the layout off was 2:30 in the morning. That's what I mean when I'd say it absolutely killed me. It was full-on long day, and you didn't sit down. You just stood on this concrete floor under the house running trains. It was just great fun, though. And so, yeah, that's what I want to do again, because it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And it helped me, and as you know, as a manufacturer, sometimes it's quite difficult to keep your passion.
Yeah.
And so radio, I found that was something that really motivated me to do my own modelling, and it helped me to keep my passion, and I made a lot of genuine, long-lasting friendships out of it as well. And yeah, so that's the thing that I think is missing these days, and I think it's something that should be fostered more and more. But yeah, most of the shops used to do something.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm looking forward to is now that I'm out of Melbourne and not as involved in exhibitions. Well, not exhibitions in general, but I mean, you know, I had all the exhibitions I was doing, plus I had, you know, Lyndon's trains and cane trains, but I was also organising the Diamond Creek exhibition for its first 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I got really excited about building my layout Herbert River and went hell for leather and got the layout built. Took it to the first exhibition, and then after I got home after the exhibition, having done, you know, 12 exhibitions in the previous 12 months, plus that one, plus all my normal business, the layout came back home.
Yeah.
And I never put it up again until a week before the exhibition the next year, just to make sure it was still working.
Yeah.
and did repair work on it, and that happened for 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row.
And the shows really did take it out of you, didn't they?
They do, but I think it's not the show itself, it's just the lead up to it where you go,
yes,
I've got a stock for this, you know. Yeah, it's, I think, you know, we charge what we do for a reason, and, you know, we don't want to, I mean, you know, we were talking about money before, but I don't think there's quite the level of understanding as to how much of your own personal time actually goes into it.
Yeah.
And you know, if I was to stop doing what I do and just stick to my normal job, and if I was doing that for the same amount of time, I'd be making, I could retire.
Yeah.
You know, it's the difference in, you don't do it, so you're not there to make, you're doing it because people want it, and you get a little bit of reward out of it.
Yes.
Which is generally how I buy my own trains. Like any money I make from the show, the whole business was set up with that, wound up being with that concept was what was pay for the hobby, and that's great.
Yeah.
But the amount of personal time that goes into getting ready for a show and having stock levels up, or even just getting a new kit ready, it's phenomenal. And it's done outside of your normal employment hours.
Yep.
So it's into your family time, your personal time, your social time. So you know, it's a massive commitment. So to all you youngies out there who are looking to start a business, remember, commitment, motivation, effort.
Give up sleeping. And yes, as what I always used to say is the only way to make a small fortune in this industry is to start with a big one and work really, really hard.
Yeah. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's times when. So I mean, I used to run basically. I've always pretty much run 24/7, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I did notice the absurdity of it hit home once on the day of my father's funeral. Right, we came back to my place at Kenmore, and we were doing the wake, and there was about probably 30 of us there, and I was up at the front of the house on the phone to a customer walking through a problem he was having with a kid. And it was only after that my wife at the time pointed out to me the absurdity of that situation.
I vaguely remember hearing a very similar story about you doing that at your wedding as well.
Oh yeah, that did happen at my wedding. That was, so my father passed away 1 month and 3 days, I think it was, after my wedding. He was quite ill, and he just hung around for that. And so that actually happened at my wedding reception as well. And so radio, yes, it's one of those sort of, it's not a normal business, is it? It's something that does take over every aspect of your life.
Yeah, and I think because you tend to build personal relationships with people as well, and customers and stuff, that that 9 to 5 or normal business boundary doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so you do get messages up until 12 o'clock at night, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, yeah, which is, fine. Doesn't, I've been dealing with it. It's no difference from a normal day job. But I think the thing is, it's effort. All of it, and I'm not saying effort in a bad way, but I'm saying it is a lot of effort and commitment.
Well, but the thing is that you do it because you're passionate about it.
That's right.
Because we're all basically 10-year-old kids that haven't grown up. And yeah, this is where I find a big disconnect in that, to me, and I know that one group that I'm about to mention will argue and scream at me and, how wrong I am, but I still maintain it, is that there's two different types of manufacturers in our industry. There's the type that are in it, I like trains, I'll see if I can make a quid out of it. And then there's the other type that are in it completely by accident. It's just, I want this, I'll make this for me. Oh, others want it too. I'll make a few more, and then it sort of grew. Which is yourself and myself, obviously. And basically, they get to a stage where the other side, they want a 9 to 5 business. Like, I think it was the Scientist put a thing on their website at one point where it was just, the phones are open from 9 till 5 or whatever it was. Do not expect a courteous response outside of these hours. It's like, mate, you're in the wrong game. And, it's just, that's never going to happen. But I like all of that side of it. And you do, as you said, you do build genuine friendships from customers. Right? And radio, and one of the biggest things for me that I love, that makes everything worthwhile, is that I remember meeting these kids when I was younger, and genuinely were, holding Daddy's hand and scared of the ugly bikey bloke with the long hair, and they're sort of, no, you can talk to Mr. Wuiske. It's like, no, I'm just Adam. That was my old man, And, radio, and you talk to them, and then those kids now, I'm talking to them and their kids. And I love that. I genuinely love that.
You just made me realise how long I've been doing this when I started thinking about a few of the kids I knew were this height who are now taller than me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ages you quite a lot.
Exhibitions and hang out with,
Right, and I mean, you can either look at it and go, geez, I'm getting old, that's bad. Or you can look at it and just go, yeah, I like this. It makes for a good life. It's not an opulent and luxurious life, but it's an enjoyable life, for the most part.
Yes, it's just, don't expect to become a millionaire doing it.
No, unless you started as a billionaire. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the hobby, and I thoroughly enjoy the industry. Obviously there are certain customers, manufacturers, and people that we cross paths with frequently that are genuine born-again assholes. But thankfully, I tried to put that as tactfully as I could. But the thing is that thankfully there's not many of them, really. And yeah, they do stand out in your memory because you have to spend time quelling arguments and this and that and the other. But by and large, the people that we deal with are bloody brilliant. They're better than humans.
Yeah. I think humans themselves could probably do with a few lessons right at this point in time, but that's probably for another conversation.
Well, for sure. But it's something that I find that side of the hobby is what keeps me interested and keeps me going. I will say, so I've got to ask a question. This is apropos of nothing. It's just popped into my brain cell. Have you ever fallen down the trap of people asking you to produce a certain kit and then you've done it? And did it bite you in the ass?
No.
No.
I haven't had one bite me in the ass, but the last one, in fact, the last kit I put out, which was the Victorian Railways U961, it's one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
And a mate came up and said, "Oh, look, I reckon you should do this." And this was at an exhibition. Where were we? A stall out in Western Victoria, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, all right." So I had my computer there, and you know, exhibitions, they sort of, the mornings are busy, then lunchtime quiets down, then you'll get a little bit of a pickup again, but then the rest of the afternoon, you know, you can do whatever you want. So I had my computer, so I started drawing it up. So I had it drawn up by the end of the show, pretty much. And yeah, ended up putting it out as a kit. And you know, my mistake was he then came and said, "Oh, now you should do this one. Now you should do this one." Yeah, so he's given me all these list of kits, and it was cool though because they were all one-off wagons.
Mm.
So you know the big manufacturers will never touch them.
Yeah.
So you know, but you're only likely to sell, or you think you're only likely to sell one of each to each person.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, the last two kits I've released have both been one-offs. So I did a BMX 1 boxcar, which Ozcision had released the standard BMX, which had a door at each end, but I chose to do BMX 1, which only had doors at one end.
Yep.
And it was one of a kind. And people buy 3 or 4 of them. So
they're modelling it's their version of reality. They're modelling a kind of what-if scenario.
Yeah, but they like the wagon. So I want a few of them.
Mm. Oh, I had similar with, I did a kit of 1225, if you're familiar with that. So that was, for those that don't know, the 1200 class, which there was 10 of, the QR basically converted one, because they were a full-width hood unit, converted one to having walkways down the side to try and extend its longevity. And it lasted in traffic for 3 years. It spent most of its time around the Toowoomba area and towards Brisbane, in departmental traffic usually. Now, there was only one of them, and it wasn't in service for long, and still exists. But I had one guy that bought 7.
Yeah.
Over time, he bought one, put it together, and really liked it. And then over the years, he kept buying them, and I just started to, you know what it's like at shows. You can't really pay that much attention to individual people because you're just bombarded. But I remember this guy, I said, "How many of these things have you got? I know I've sold you like at least 2 or 3 of these things." And he said, "Oh no," he said, "I've actually finished 7. I was like, "Why?" He said, "I just like them." Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I will say, so I learnt that every time I had people ask me, "Oh, Adam, you should make this kit. It'd be brilliant. You'd sell a heap. I'll buy a heap, you know, da-da-da-da-da," and all of that. Every time I did that, it bit me in the ass. The VAOW wood chip hoppers, that was the big one for me.
Really?
I had so many people ask me to do those. And they were just a standard 63-ton coal hopper. But they had these massive hungry boards on top.
Yep.
And they had this neat yellow sticker on the side that said, you know, Gladstone to Owen Yellow traffic only, because of the height of them. And so there was only, I think, 32 of them or something built. And the guy who was really, like, every time I talked to him for 6 months, he was saying, "Why haven't you done these yet? When are you doing these? Da-da-da-da-da." All you've got to do is you've already got the wagon, you've just got to make the hungry boards. Okay. Eventually I did. So I did it, I did the decals and all the rest of that, and it was actually a very neat model, and because of my interest in weathering, I quite liked it, because the wagon, as an old coal hopper, was as grotty as hell.
Yep.
But the hungry boards on top were just this neat, fairly clean stainless steel. So I made them, and everyone liked them. They went, "Oh, geez, they're great." The guy who said he wanted a whole rake of them, he bought 3 or 4. So we're playing fast and loose with the definition of a rake here. And other than that, I think I sold about 6.
Whoa.
So I did this kit. Thankfully, it didn't cost me too much because I already had the wagon. But it was a handmade pattern and all the rest of that. And yeah, I sold around about 10. That's it. And
damn.
Yeah, rightio. Then there was another one I did was the ITS sleeper wagon, which was a HSA open wagon with the sides removed and the ends were extended. And again, it's an old grotty wagon that had these shiny yellow additions made to it with RHS. And then it was just for carrying sleepers. And New South Wales had a similar one. And so I did those, and I think I personally had the largest fleet of any Queensland modeler ever, in that I had 2. And yeah, I think I sold 7. Whereas if you go back to the VAK coal hoppers I did, I sold 4,500 of those.
Yeah, weird, hey?
And then the grain hoppers, the VGKs, I did it was like 1,600 or something of those.
Yeah.
And this is all pre-ready to run days. And
it's weird. I've got one kit that it's the Victorian Railways 4-door QR open wagon.
Yep, I know the one.
And it doesn't matter how many I produce, they just keep going out the door.
But
and that was like the 3rd or 4th kit I released, and so it's been around for 15 years.
Yeah,
It's still the number 1 seller.
but correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't Steam Era do a model of the same wagon?
No, they do the 3-door version.
Okay, right.
So when I was starting to do it, I think Steam Era. I was actually in the middle of doing the masters for it. Steam Era announced the 3-door version about the same time. I think it was a while ago. Anyway, but yeah, so I was doing the 4-door version, yeah, it just keeps selling.
But it's
great. I mean, I'm not complaining.
Of course not. Well, that becomes your bread and butter.
Yeah.
It's the same with. Well, there's quite a few that we had that were like that. They were your staples, and they meant that you could afford to do other products that maybe weren't so successful.
Yeah, and so some kits you might have one set of molds going at any given time for them because you don't turn over a lot of them, but you just need to have a couple there just in case. But then you've got the QR where I have multiple molds sitting here ready to go.
Yeah.
Because I need to produce them fast. So.
But yeah, it was funny like that because some of the models we did were exactly that, with just the staples. They just and some of them weren't common things. Weirdly. But it's funny you mentioned about the QR because I only know of the existence of the QR thanks to Dr. Google. Because, well, for a while, whenever you typed in QR to do with railways into Google, it would always come up with this bloody open wagon on fat gauge. That I...
Sorry, that's probably my fault for all the SEO work I did.
It just, and I was like, what the hell is this? That's not Queensland. What? And that's the code. And I mean, now you type into Google, you type QR in there, and it comes up with these funny code things that I don't understand that all look like an explosion at a Dalmatian factory. And yeah, so radio. But that's how I know about the QR open wagon, was just through getting frustrated with photos of the wrong thing coming up on Google. But radio, that's the way it works. So, yeah, it's my main knowledge of Victorian stuff comes out of doing patterns for Krause for OWAST.
Yes.
So I did the ZLP. I think there was another guards van. There was quite a few things I did. I did the B van. HC or something, whatever it was. There was a refrigerated wagon.
Refrigerated wagon?
Yeah, it was a 4-wheel refrigerated wagon with a peaked roof.
Three van?
tea, yeah, I did those. There was a few. But yeah, basically all the stuff that was done under OWASP, I did the lion's share of the patterns. And it was me doing that work. That's what actually paid for me to do the QLX and the QSC ready to run.
Yeah.
Was doing all of that pattern making. I basically didn't sleep for a few months. I was just constantly on CAD. And then I did other stuff for other companies, and yeah, it's quite funny. There was a discussion that I happened to hear where they were talking about some model, and they were saying, "Oh, these are so much better than Wuiske model stuff." I was like, "Well, it was one of my patterns." And
you could put more effort into your own stuff.
Of course. And yeah, I just found it hilarious. But you know, you get that. There's always those sorts of things in there. So now that you're up and near enough to Queensland and all the rest of that, what are your plans?
So my plans are I'll start hitting up some of the Queensland shows. Northern New South. If there's any in Northern New South Wales, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just start my own one.
Yep. Wouldn't hurt.
Did it once, became one of the premier shows in the country, so I can do it again if I want to. But yeah, by the way, Diamond Creek is coming up at Easter, people. Don't miss out.
You need to talk to Tyson from Modeller's Warehouse.
I have his card. I had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago. His card's in a bag around here somewhere.
So he...
Oh, I spoke to him last week.
In the chat, yeah.
Yeah, I had a chat with him last week.
So you want to talk to him because he's been looking at setting up a show. So he and I have had discussions for many years, and feel free to weigh in on this, about how the shows are basically dying.
They're not Victoria.
Well, they're dying in one aspect, in that they're getting quite a few problems in that. So I'm not sure about Victoria because I don't have my passport and vaccination status and all of that for going there. But the shows up here, a club would run a show, they'd hire a venue, usually off the council, and then they'd run food and drinks and all the rest of that. And that's how the clubs would generate revenue. Now, and then on top of that, you had the traders like us, and then effectively what we paid for our stand would pay for the venue. Well, now it's a situation where they've turned around due to bureaucracy and all of that garbage, where they can't run the food and drinks.
Yeah, it depends on it. So the way Diamond Creek works is, so generally the traders' money covers the cost of layouts. The venue is close to, I don't know, it's put it this way, there's several zeros on it.
Yeah.
And it's from the first year we put it on in the current location to where it is now, it's almost doubled in cost.
Yep.
It's gone up every year by about $1,000. And we are allowed to have a sausage sizzle outside.
Yep.
But there's also, because it's a 3 basketball court stadium, and it's got a cafe attached to it, so they have the cafe open the whole weekend as well.
Yep.
So it's a great space, great location.
I know that. So I have a big problem with.
The club makes its money off the
door.
The door and the bar.
So I have a massive problem with the venues, in that, especially they're council owned. I already own that venue.
Well, our venue got sold.
Right.
It was a community stadium, and it got sold off to a company that I believe is owned by the Richmond Football Club, and they have a directive to keep increasing the costs, as far as I know. So,
yep. But I know that, when you're talking, 20 grand plus for hiring a venue that is owned by the public, right? And then you take away the food and the drinks, which is what's happened here in Queensland. So they sell the rights to producing food, and most of it's crap. And so, but the people doing the food, they're just trying to make a quid like the rest of us. So, they're paying their stall fee, which is insane, some of the amount they're paying for those. And so they sell their garbage food that's usually pre-packaged at exorbitant prices. And so you take away that side of the revenue stream for the clubs. Then you take out the situation where a lot of the shows no longer give any sort of money to the layout owners for bringing their layouts, just because there's not enough in the kitty to do it. So rightio, then you get the fact that you're struggling to get layouts for a lot of these shows up here. And so I've heard this from quite a few people that, they go to shows and it's the same layouts they've seen at every other Queensland show for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Right, and okay, fair enough. And we all know that there is a wide variation in the quality of those layouts. And right, so the shows from that side of it are dying in the sense that there's not the new layouts, there's not the revenue stream for the clubs. And then you get the political side where there's so many chiefs and not enough Indians involved in actually doing the legwork that it becomes very difficult to run a decent event. And so, yeah, I've had discussions with these clubs for years about it, and they're seeing the writing on the wall as well. And they're sort of saying, well, what do we do to fix it? And it's like, well, there's not really a lot you can do.
There is. I've got an idea.
Yeah.
So everyone watching out this who has a layout that is exhibitable, who lives in Queensland, reach out to myself or Adam if you are prepared to bring your layout to an exhibition if we organise something.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Yes, please do. And yeah, it's something that... So I actually was looking at setting up the Wuiske Model Centre here. So I've got 5 acres here, so the plan was to build another shed or another structure just out in front of this one.
That's for me.
Just for you. And that idea was to have basically a show, or more like a convention, and the plan I had was open it up for free. I've got the public liability and all the rest of that under the business.
Yeah.
So just turn up. And then, so that means that any club, I don't care who, could turn up, use this space. So that takes one bill out of the way. The only downside is that it's located in Colpie, so it's a town of like 63 people.
Yeah.
Like literally, I think it is 63. It's not many.
So you're going to put on a big show. Hopefully it's got accommodation for an extra 2,000 while you're at it.
Well, it's funny because when I first moved here, I actually had people approach me. There was a bus company that approached me. There was... Word got out what I was doing, because this shed is not far from the highway. And the stories about what this shed was for were insane. It was a wheat shed. It was a chicken shed. We were going to be doing battery hens. There's all sorts of stories. And then it came out that, no, guy actually, it's for model trains. Which nobody believed, but they heard it enough times that they went, maybe, and then they sort of, there's a guy getting around, he's got long hair, you'll see him. And they'd come up and they'd say, hi, I'm such and such. Is it true this is for model trains? You go, yeah. Oh, brilliant. And people just started coming out of the woodwork.
How do you grow them?
Yeah. Well, lots and lots of fertiliser. There is definitely no shortage of fertiliser.
most of it verbal.
Oh, absolutely. But but my plan was that we'll make it so that, okay, you've got to travel, 2 hours from Brizzy, but make it a free venue. And then that way, that takes care of one problem. And then, if you bring it... So the Yanks have done stuff where they've done online shows and all of that. And, that was sort of how we started the chat, and a lot of other things like that was just because, with all the lockdowns from COVID and everything else, it was about just making it so people could still connect. And so, okay, you don't know which way it could go, but let's have a crack at it. And that's why I say you need to talk to Tyson, because he has been looking at setting up a show in the greater Brisbane area somewhere for a few years. He's been talking about it. Because he's very keen on doing it without all the politics and all the rest of that. And the feelers that he's put out, it could actually be quite successful. So,
I was gonna say, it's not hard to do.
No.
But, I mean, it's not hard to do, but it is hard to do at the same time. It's,
yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, you'll do it.
The hardest part is finding the venue.
Yes.
You find the right venue, sweet. Doesn't matter where it is. People will come.
Then you get from there, you get to the question of continuity in that. So I always sort of worked on the theory that with a show, your first year was meaningless because people will come. You'll get the people through the door because they come to have a look. The second year was always the toughest year. The third year, from there on, that's where you could start to work on, all right, we can expect this many people and this many, all the other problems that come in. And that's when you started to get into a groove with it. The big issue... Sorry?
I started Diamond Creek in a hall not much bigger than this shed. It wasn't Diamond Creek then, it was in Hurstbridge, which is just up the road from Diamond Creek, but it was like, okay, I think we had 5 traders or 6 traders and maybe 6 layouts. Yeah, it was a very small thing, but we did really well.
Yep.
And so we did it again, and again, and then decided, I wonder if we could not take it up a notch. So we got the stadium in Diamond Creek, and we didn't use all of the stadium the first time round, but managed to get it up to, I think, 32 or 33 exhibits. And then normally now we're up around 60.
Beautiful.
So,
but it's I found that for shows that when they changed venue or date, but particularly venue, they basically started from scratch. And the reason they changed venue was invariably due to the fact that the pricing had been doubled and tripled, and some of the figures I've heard are just would make your eyes water for what these people are expecting for venues.
Oh, totally. But at the same time, you have to ask the question, well, why would you go with a venue that charges that much?
Of course, you can't. There's no way you can viably do it.
Yeah, I mean, the venue essentially needs to just be somewhere that's windproof with a roof over your head where you're not going to get wet.
Yeah.
And that's all you need.
Oh, and relatively level is something so nice.
Yeah, let's not talk Brisbane showgrass.
I am genuinely in a very large group of one who actually liked the tent at Brisbane.
I've never exhibited at Brisbane. I've only been there as a participant, as a member of the general public.
The Brisbane show.
That's been a long time since I've been.
When it was at the old RNA.
I've just heard things about the levels.
When it was at the old Horticultural Pavilion, the Brisbane show was magical. It was, and, I went there every year since I was a kid. And I started working at the Brisbane show from about the age of 14, and I think I only missed when I was 18 and 19 because I was in Sydney, and so it was a very full-on show, and especially when Peter Sanderson was running it, they'd get I think the biggest number I heard was 21 or 23,000 people. Like, it was a big show. And the way it used to work was, as a 3-day show, I would lose my voice on the Saturday, and I learnt that chocolate milk and really cheap and nasty hot dogs, which was what was available at the food vendors, were actually really good for lining your throat so you could keep talking. Because you know what it's like, you're always sort of yelling.
I go with iced coffee, but yes, the milk, yes.
Yeah. And then the thing is, and I know you're guilty of this too, is that what you do to get a break from yelling is you go out for a smoke. which makes everything better. And so I'd lose my voice on the Saturday. Then the Sunday and Monday, I'd lose my voice again by the Monday. And then I used to have a thing, because we did these shows and we ate just crap food and we were on the go because I used to leave home at like 3 o'clock on Friday morning, because we were always one of the first ones set up, because the other traders and the other vendors and the other layout exhibitors would come over and grab what they needed whilst there was no one from the public around, because it's the only chance they get.
Yeah.
And so I was always, we set up, and by 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, we were set up, we were going. But it was more relaxed and you could chin wag and all of that. Yeah. So that's fine. But I started doing a thing where every show on the Saturday night, I just said, right, bugger it, we're going out for dinner somewhere. Because I just want to sit down and have a nice, enjoyable meal of potentially actual food, where we're not on the run eating it, And so we'd usually end up going to a Sizzler's. And the problem was at one time, we went to, I think it was the Bundy show, I started going out for dinner with Jimmy Costello from J&J Hobbies. So one of the most important things to me is I met Jim when I was 8 years old, 38 years ago, and I still admire and respect the man immensely, and we get along like a house on fire. And I still go out, when I do the shows, I'd go out for dinner with him, and that was just a thing that no matter what, we do that. Right? And that was really important to me. But then every now and then a customer would come along too, and then word got out, and then it changed into, Wuiske Models is doing a Wuiske Models dinner. And it was like, well, no. But the worst one we had, I think it was 43 people trying to get to the into the Redlands, Cleveland, into the Sizzlers there. That was a nightmare. It sort of morphed into this insane thing. It was great fun, but it would take 5 or 6 days to get fed. And yeah, so...
Exist?
Sorry?
Does Sizzler still exist? Are they still around? Or?
No, I have heard that there's one in Perth or something, maybe. I'm not going there for some cheese toast.
No.
So yeah, I'll ask Gary Lamb when he's next in on the Friday night chat and see if he knows. He's over that way. But yeah, I liked going to Sizzlers just because it was comfortable, it wasn't overly expensive, and everyone could find something they were mildly happy with. So, radio. But yeah, it's that was just something that we did, and it sort of took off and became a thing. And yeah, but the shows were full on setting up and getting ready to get all the stock ready, as you were mentioning before, and then unpacking it was just as bad, restocking the shelves and everything else. And so to do those 2 or 3 day shows was easily minimum 2 weeks work. If it was all kids, it was a month to a month and a half's work. And it was just full on. And I think the biggest year we did 11 shows in a year.
Yeah, I did a run 3 years in a row where I was doing at least 12 a year.
It's painful, isn't it?
Hard work.
I mean, it's fun, but it's...
Oh yeah, you're right, it's fun. Some shows were a lot more fun than others.
Yeah.
Some of them, like the last Amrit Caulfield I did, I got slammed. Like, I was just so busy.
Yeah.
By 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the first day, my voice was totally shot.
Yep.
I was just exhausted because I was so ridiculously busy. It was just insane.
And as I said, is you're yelling because the background noise, because of the amount of people there.
Yeah.
And
that's it. The ambient noise, just bombardment, all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, it was I turned over so much. I couldn't do anything other than go home happy.
Yeah.
It was damn hard work.
It's funny because did you ever do the Toowoomba show?
I haven't done any up here, no.
So the Toowoomba show used to be my favourite.
Yeah.
The Brisbane show, sales-wise, obviously was my favourite, but so far as being enjoyable, the Toowoomba show was my favourite. Bundy was my next favourite, not because of the show. It was my favourite because everyone that was there, barring about 5 people, were not from Bundaberg.
Yeah.
So everyone was staying in hotels, usually on Bourbon Street, and everyone was out going drinking, and the stories.
Yeah, that's the fun. It's like there's a few around Victoria. You got Warrnambool, Stawell, Albury. They're the first three that leap into my head anyway.
Yeah.
Where it's you go back to the motel, everyone's just sitting. Well, you go to a pub for dinner first, and back to the motel. Everyone just sits outside drinking whatever, talking shit until it's bedtime, and gets up the next morning going, why did I do that again? I've still got a day of this to go.
My thing is I don't actually drink, so it doesn't affect me. So, but I do have very fond recollections of a certain ex-Navy person that shall remain nameless, literally falling up 2 flights of stairs at 1 o'clock in the morning. There's a I don't know if I can share it or not, but there's quite a funny story about me at Goulburn from a couple of years ago. Mate, I'm going to say this. We are 2 hours and 6 minutes in, so say what you want, right? The delicate little petals have probably clicked that little X by now.
How about we make this the last anecdote for this one, and we can do another one and spread more.
We can do that, but I figure we're far enough in that the people with common sense have already closed it.
Yeah.
So say what you want.
So it was the Saturday night of the Goulburn show, and it was the same weekend as Streamliners was on, actually.
Okay.
And, or the weekend after or something, I can't remember. But anyway, not important. And a group of us met over in the trike shed in the yards, Goulburn Yard. It was absolutely pissing down rain. Anyway, we'd already had. Oh, that's right. I did the what do you call it? I was the Saturday night speaker at the dinner.
Right.
So I did this whole stand-up routine for half an hour, and in order to get my nerves under control before I did it, I'd knocked back a few. And so I was settled. Asked Kieran Ryan about my stand-up routine.
Was it meant to be a stand-up routine, or were you supposed to be doing like a speech or something?
No. I'd written this whole thing and then did it. But anyway, but yeah, Kieran Ryan in particular. I've never heard someone laugh till they cried, but he did. Afterwards, they're like, we're going over the shed, so I'm like, okay, cool, I'll meet you over there. We're having dinner first, and I'll meet you over there. And so I had dinner, and then grabbed a couple of bottles of wine to take over to the shed. And it's absolutely pissing down, so I get drenched. Fortunately, they had this old New South Wales Railway stove still in the middle of the shed. And it was pumping out an absolutely amazing thing. And anyway, so it was drying off and everything, and open a bottle of wine, and I turn around, oh, where's the glasses? Anyone got cups? And they're like, no, there's no cups here. I'm like, oh. So I had to drink from the bottle. Oh,
what a shame. Was there a paper bag handy at all?
No, there was no paper
Okay,
bags.
Right, yeah.
I'm not ashamed to walk down the street with a couple of bottles of wine.
Empty or otherwise.
Had no idea. We were just sitting there drinking, and I've got this bottle, so 2 bottles, so I'm just swinging. So I had no idea how much I drank, right? In what space of time, because there was no cup to measure from or whatever, and I didn't understand how much you were really drinking. And everyone's chatting away, whatever. Anyway, we decided to go back into town to go out for drinks at the pub, and I polished off the 2 bottles. This is after 3 hours or so. And we got about 10 feet from the shed, and I just face planted in the middle of the rail yard.
As you do.
Yeah, just gone boom. And then I get up, I get about another 10 feet, do the same thing again. And then I get up again, and we walk, we get over the other side of the rail yard, back into the town. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to my room, I'll change my gear, and I'll meet you down there. And I never showed up. And then there's all this, where's Lyndon? What's happened to him? There was this panic. And so this mission went out to find me and see what had happened to me, because I'd already dropped over twice. So I was like, oh shit, I hope he's all right. And so anyway, group of them wind up back at my motel after midnight, waking up the manager, saying, look, our friend's gone missing. He was really, a bit off his head, and we don't know what's happened to him, and we're able to see if he's got to his room, if he's okay. And so anyway, the motel manager got up, they opened the door, found me face down on my bed in my Johnson, snoring like a motherfucker.
So you've just reminded me of one that...
Oh, I did. I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Please continue.
So the next morning, there's a knock on the door, and Phil's staying. Phil opened the door and Phil's like, "Are you ready to go? It's time to go." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yep, all right."
Is this Phil Badger?
Yeah.
Yep.
He goes, "You okay?" And I went, "Yeah, all right." He goes, "By the way, are these yours?" And he holds up my keys, my car keys. And I said, "Yeah, why have you got them?" He goes, "I found them in a puddle out the front of the hotel." On his way in. I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like, where's my mobile phone? I can't find my phone. And so then a couple of the other guys, we went looking for it. I couldn't find it anywhere. I'm like, oh shit. Anyway, it turns out I'd left it next to where I was sitting down in the trike shed the night before. So they found that down there. And I got my phone back. But anyway, long story short, well, it's not anymore, it's a long story now. But, I have not lived that one down.
So when we did the Gold Coast show, so the Gold Coast show, from a sales perspective, was my least favourite show. Absolutely loved the club. So, Marty Jenkins, right, and people like that. So they ran it. And Marty Jenkins, Rockwall, and the late, great Craig Thistlewaite, who was the most lovely person you'd ever meet. And sadly is not with us anymore. And so, now being the Gold Coast, they'd move around a bit due to venues and this and that and the other. But they used to have it at the PCYC. I think it was Arundel. And anyway, sorry?
Can you hear that?
I can.
It's the rain.
I was about to say you've got rain there. So there's none here. But it's been threatening for 2 days. It's just nothing's happened. But when we had this show, we got to Sunday, and Phil Mooney, who used to be one of the organisers, lovely guy, like just these are genuinely the funniest and the most enjoyable people to spend time with. But the Gold Coast show was my least favourite, just because the demographic of the public, right, on a socio-economic level, it was kind of up there, But the amount of haggling that they would do.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was insane. You'd never pick it, and I don't handle that stuff well, right? And so I don't know how to deal with it. So it used to drive me bonkers. So anyway, from a sales perspective, they were either good or they were diabolically shit. There was nothing in between. But we had this show, and on the Sunday, Phil was walking around and he was doing the announcements. And so they'd always set me up near one of the doors so that I could just stick my head out the door and have a smoke. So I was out there having a smoke, and Phil came out, and we were having a bit of a chin wag, and we decided we were a bit bored, right? And Phil had this microphone, right? And so anyway, it was dying down. There was about probably 200 or 300 people in the hall, outside of traders and all of that. So there was still quite a few people, but it was dying off, you know. And I just looked at this microphone and I said, what's the go with that? And Phil said, oh, it's just for doing announcements and all that. And I said, oh. He said, can I have a look at that for a minute? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Right, yeah. The fool. So anyway, and I've just thought, right, who can I pick on? And, well, the first name that popped into my head was Al Cutmore. Right? And because no one would ever rip the piss. I mean, you know what Al's like. No one would ever rip the piss out of Al at these shows, right? And not like this. And because everywhere he walks, being ex-military and all of that, it's chest out and, you know, you can see him coming, right? So anyway, so he's over the other side of the hall, and you basically had this giant hallway, and then the main room was here. And off the hallway there was 2 entries. So I've just gotten onto the microphone, and I can see him. He's about 150 feet away, and I've just, Al Cutmore to the front entrance, please. And all of a sudden you can see Al, you can see this head pop up, and he's just sort of, oh, right, yeah. So that's it, chest out, and he's marching. He could have been marching into Poland the way he was going, right? And so off he goes, and you could see him. He goes around the corner, and about 2 or 3 minutes later, there's a now somewhat less impressive Al appears at the entry to that room. And he's talking to these members, and you can see a lot of shoulder shrugging going on, and hands doing this, and all of that, and rightio. And so Al's sort of, oh, okay, fair enough. So he starts walking back towards his stand, and then all of a sudden it comes over the PA system. Al Cutmore to the rear entrance, please. Al Cutmore, rear entrance. And off he goes again, right? You know, chest out. Rightio. And then about 5 or 6 minutes after this, he comes back, and he's just standing in the opening, and these members, one of them has spotted me and is trying not to laugh, and the others are just, we don't know what's going on, you know. And so Al's not real impressed by this stage. And then so, rightio.
Seeming terribly impressed.
And he's still having this conversation and trying to work out what the hell's going on. And then I've just come over the PA system and I said, Al Cutmore, could you please stop listening to that Adam Wuiske bastard? Right? And all you could see was this hand coming up over the crowd doing this. And yeah, so, rightio. So that was one, and then that sort of started a thing where every Gold Coast show there'd be some sort of piss taking. And there was one with the layout Southport that used to be Peter Woolley's. That was left in his will to the Gold Coast Club. And so they were operating it, and they had a problem with a set of Pico points. Mm-hmm. And I was selling Pico points at the time, and myself and Rob who worked with me at the time, we got in there a bit later, so about, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock, but the boys were in there at 7 trying to fix these points. And anyway, what they'd done is they came over to my stand. This was Marty. And they came over to my stand, they grabbed a set of points off the wall, and they were going to leave a note saying, oh yeah, we'll fix you up for it when you get in, right? But instead what Marty did was he took the points out of the packet, put the broken set in the packet, and put them back on the shelf.
Oh no.
So my first indication of this was about 3 hours into the show. Someone came up and they said, oh yeah, great, I need some points. And they went over and they went, oh, these are weathered. What? And he said, yeah, these are weathered. And I said, not only that, I said, the packet's open. Right? And that's a bit strange. And rightio, and they were gapped. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I've gone around, I've spoken to Craig, and Craig was oblivious to this. Right? Marty's standing next to him, fully aware of his guilt. Right? Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, I said, mate, something's happened here. And he said, we'll look into it. You know, Craig was genuinely, you know, we'll have to look into this, Adam, you know, and all that. And so I don't know what's going on. And meanwhile, Marty's just disappeared because he's had to go piss himself laughing. And then eventually, I worked out what had happened. And then Martian's come over and absolutely ripped the piss out of me for it. Rock's done the same, and then about a dozen others over the course of the next hour have done the same, and they've absolutely ripped into me for this. So I thought, right, I'll fix you, you bastard. So there was this massive car park. It went back hundreds of metres, and Marty's car was right down the end. And so he and Rock went over to get the car. So prior to that, unbeknownst to them, I'd gone out there and I'd left a little note on his windshield, right? And so Marty's driven all this way, and I'm standing just near where we had our stand and just having a smoke and just casually watching this car, and I'm thinking, right, here we go. And they've pulled up right in front of me, and Rock's pointed out this thing flapping under his windshield wiper. And Marty's gotten out and had a look, and there's this note that says, "Sorry I bumped into your car. I don't think the damage looks too bad. Because people are watching me, I'm going to pretend to write my phone number. It is 7. Hugs and kisses, Susie," or something like that. Right? So now Marty and Rock are now doing multiple laps of their car trying to find this mythical damage. Right? And just this look, and they're just looking around going, yeah, what the bloody hell's going on, and all of that. And then eventually Marty's looked up and he's seen me with this grin on my face, and he's just gone, "Can Wuiske?" Right? And so, yeah, so that was the payback. But we had a lot of that sort of stuff that went on where you just absolutely rip into each other. And you need to do that. It's fun. It makes it entertaining. You know.
Nothing like a harmless prank.
Oh, of course. And yeah, but Marty still, if you mention it in the chat, he will start cackling like a dyslexic schoolgirl, as he does, right? And then he will tell you the story all about those points because he still rips it into me about it. But Marty and Rock used to have a tendency to get onto the homemade bourbon at shows.
That sounds dangerous.
And so they would basically, on a Sunday at a show, Marty could be found in a folding chair. By 9 o'clock in the morning, he would be asleep. Right?
Yeah.
And as you know, he's not the most delicate of little petals. And so you'd sort of see him from a distance, and there was an Adam's Corner that I did where I had a multiple series of photos that I just took as I got closer and closer to him, of him being fast asleep. And then the final photo is just this one eye open on Marty. I was about this far from his head.
Yeah.
Right, and this one eye open, not looking very impressed. And yeah, so it became a regular thing that people started trying to take photos of Marty fast asleep at shows. So
I'm trying to sympathise. I'm not really getting there. But,
oh no, I'm not giving him any sympathy. We did one. Myself and Bridget, we did one at the Bundaberg show. They all got an Airbnb. Marty, Rock, Dan Candlin, his wife Glennis. I think there was one other guy. And yeah, we ended up sitting around there until 2 o'clock in the morning, just chin wagging. And I was on coffee, but nobody else was. And yeah, it made for an interesting Sunday at the show. Everyone's eyes were hanging out of their head. And so you'd have the Gold Coast boys, you'd have the Pine Rivers boys, and just, it was on for young and old. The Bundaberg show was the most fun outside of the show. Yep. But the Sundays, there was a problem in that basically the world was too loud for most of the attenders.
Yeah,
attendees.
I know that feeling.
So, yeah. So, mate, what do you reckon? We reckon we pull the pin or we keep going?
Well, I'd say keep going, but, I could really do with a pit stop.
As could I, actually, and my coffee's empty.
Well, that's all right. We can just do another one.
Now it's empty.
So just, everyone tune in for the next episode of Two Blokes Talking Trains.
I was going to say something else, but that works as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. So this idea was put to me about doing this, and it's sort of, I don't know, people will like it or they won't. That's their business. But I don't know about you, but I've had fun.
Whether they've sat through the whole 2 hours, who knows? But
we're at 2 hours and 23 minutes, so we've done all right.
Yeah, that's a lot. They could probably start streaming this, and we could probably break it up into episodes.
So,
do a binge watch.
Well, it's funny because I know that the layout that Insanity built videos, I get people put it on their TV, and they've sent me photos of their televisions with my ugly mug on it, which is quite disturbing. And then they'll put it on whilst they're working on their layout, this and that and the other, and I like that. And so, yeah, why not? I mean, yeah, half the time when I'm working on the layout, I'll either have a CD going or else I'll have a podcast or something going on in the background.
Yeah, I tend to do the same. I'll find something on YouTube to watch and put it on in the background.
So, I've learned better than to have sort of trained DVDs. I can't do trained DVDs anymore. They put me to sleep.
Yeah, I haven't watched one in a while.
And I don't mean figuratively, I mean genuinely. They put me to sleep.
That's not to say people shouldn't visit Lyndon's Train's YouTube channel and watch all the train movies I've put up there. But
I should probably do that. If you send me the link to that as a point, I'll put it in the little description-y thing. And yeah, because I actually didn't know you had a YouTube channel. I just know you as a lunatic that I talked to. Lyndon's Trains.
That's just the website. And if you go into YouTube and search Lyndon's Trains, you'll find it.
All right, I'll put a link in the description thingy. And yeah, we'll go from there. But yeah, mate, thank you for doing this. I've had an absolute ball. Hopefully you have too.
It's been a wonderful way to spend a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, it beats working for a living.
Yeah, exactly.
So, having said that, I'm actually going. I've got Tyson and Little John coming out here tomorrow evening. So we'll get in and do the next layout, that Insanity Built video.
Yep.
And so I'll do that, and I've got 24 more sets of points turning up. And Al may or may not be dropping out here on Sunday. With more handmade points.
He's been busy, hammering points together all week, isn't he?
He has.
Oh, he has been?
So yeah, I spoke to him for an hour or so last night. And yeah, so he'll be in the chat tonight. But yeah, he's basically he's had the shits with the world. So that's fair enough. And yeah, that's Al. So he and I will talk to each other when we've decided that the world needs to die. And
right.
Which is usually on days ending in Y.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so
not tomorrow.
No, it's never tomorrow. But
just all the other ones that end in Y.
Exactly. Mm. So I'm actually looking forward to hopefully getting a fair bit more done on the layout this weekend. In theory, I could have the branch line completely laid, which is only another 30 feet or something.
Yep.
Of track to go in. It's not much. And then it's about a 10-foot long section. And then I'm hoping to get started on Romer or Turbot Street, as I'm calling it, goods yard.
Nice.
So, yes, that's where it starts to get properly insane. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but that's my plan. So I've got plenty of stuff here. I've had a heap of lighting fixtures that turned up yesterday, which was rather serendipitous. And so I'm hoping to get those done whilst Tyson's here and see if that works, and then I'll buy more.
Excellent.
So that's my plan. But we'll leave it at that. We'll wrap this up. So thank you to anyone that's actually insane enough to have watched all of this. Hopefully you've found it mildly entertaining. And
let us know. Let us know if there's other shit you'd like us to talk about.
Yeah. Hopefully it was more entertaining than cholera. And yeah, we can. If it's good, if people like this sort of stuff, then we'll do more. So yeah, but thanks very much, Lyndon. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, mate. So whether it's good or bad, I don't really care. I've had fun.
Yep, that's it.
So all right, we'll cut it off there, guys. We shall see how we go.